Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to another coaching webinar. Today we've got Andy Nibbs joining us. Andy is a table tennis coach, a level 2 coach. He's also a level 4 LTA coach. So Andy is also, a mentor for the LTA. So I'm sure he'll go into that in a bit more detail in a sec. But without further ado, if I pass you over to Andy and he's going to go through the inner game of table tennis. So welcome, Andy.
Okay, thanks Ali and Sally for setting this up, and good afternoon everybody. I hope you're all well. So this presentation is on an introduction to the inner game of table tennis, and its application to learning, enjoyment, performance and life. It's something that I've spent 18 years working with and helping coaches to become more familiar, particularly in tennis, where I'm an LTA level 4 coach and training to become a mentor at the moment. So the inner game is something that was developed by somebody called Timothy Galway over 50 years ago. And what happened to the inner game, unfortunately, was that when people started to learn how useful it could be, it got taken into business in the workplace, particularly in this country. When people started to go on early courses in the 1980s and learn about the inner game, they thought that if we could use these techniques and tools in business, we'd make a lot of money, which is what happened. But about 18 years ago, a guy called Sir John Whitmore, who trained with Timothy Galway, trained a group of us as tennis coaches to become inner tennis tutors. And so it was kind of rekindled, and we started then delivering courses to coaches and helping them to develop their skills and knowledge for the inner game. Okay, so I'm just going to move it on here. Next slide, which won't work.
So just before we move on, if you see the chat option at the bottom of the screen, if you have any questions kind of throughout the webinar, please feel free to post them on there. I'll take note of them, and then hopefully towards the end of the presentation then we can ask Andy, and we've also got some of the performance team join us. We've got Matt Stanforth and Alan Cook join us as well, so we can ask them any questions related to the inner game.
Okay, yeah, so I'm sure you're all aware of what the current coaching models are, particularly within the national governing bodies in sport. There seems to be a lot of the different sporting governing bodies talking about constraints-based learning, external focus, growth mindset, and how can we develop a learner-centered coaching environment. And what the inner game does, it sort of it adds value to all of these approaches. And what I'd like to do in the webinar is to show you how you can link it up with these approaches as well. Okay. And I'd just like to say that Table Tennis England have put on some fantastic webinars, and everybody has alluded to one or other of these models. So what is the inner game? So in every game that we play, there's an external reality and an inner reality. And the external reality, or the external game, is the game that's played against the opponent, and it's played on a court or a table with rules. There might be conditions. If you're outside, obviously you've got the wind and the sun. But the inner game is the game that's played in the mind of the player and is played against obstacles such as nervousness, self-doubt, lapses in concentration, self-condemnation. And the idea is, to be successful in anything that we do, we need to have mastery over both the inner game and the outer game. It's often said with the inner game that the opponent inside your head is more formidable than the opponent on the other side of the net. That is, that we all get in our own way a little bit with being nervous, with losing concentration, etc. I'd like to just give you a brief description of how the inner game was discovered by Tim Galway. So Tim was a tennis coach who'd left university in the 1970s, and he was really interested in how people learn and how people change. And one day he was coaching somebody from the army barracks, and this guy wanted to learn how to hit a backhand topspin in tennis. And Tim had been working with him for weeks, and he just couldn't help him. You know, this guy every week just couldn't get the backhand topspin. So it was the end of the day, and Tim said, I'm just not going to say anything. I'm going to see what happens. You know, I'm quite tired. And anyway, as the lesson went on, the guy started to hit backwards and forwards, and his racket started to drop lower and lower, and he started to impart topspin on the ball. And at the end of the lesson, he was actually hitting topspin backhands. And Tim said that he felt a fraud, number one, taking money off the guy because he hadn't taught him anything. You know, his role, he thought, was I should be teaching you how to hit this backhand topspin, but you've actually hit a backhand topspin without me telling you anything. So it sent him on a bit of a journey to sort of find out, well, what's actually happening. And a couple of things that stood out for him at this time was that, and this is 50 years ago, that the students or the players were coming to him, and they were trying very hard to fix an aspect of their game, and they looked to him to remedy it, to come up with a fix and say what needed to be done. But in this particular thing, the thing he noticed here with this guy from the army barracks was the effortlessness which change for the better took place when the students stopped trying so hard and trusted in their natural capacity to learn from experience. So he hadn't said anything in this environment, and the guy had just played from experience. You know, he probably didn't receive any input, any instruction, and he was simply hitting the ball. And this became an epiphany moment for Tim because he wanted to find out, you know, what was happening in the mind of the player when they're learning. And what he realized was there were the well-intentioned instructions that he was giving his students were being internalized by the students as methods of control over their own game. So when he told them, you know, keep your wrist firm, make sure you step into the ball, try and follow through, they'd internalized his comments and were using them as methods of control to try and control their bodies. Okay? But this internal dialogue was creating an interference. Okay? It was what was getting in the way. And it's what we know today as thinking too much and trying too hard. Okay? I see a lot of people come to my lessons, both in tennis and table tennis, that just seem to be naturally, it seems to be naturally inbuilt to overthink things and to overtry. So anyway, this internal dialogue was creating interference. And Tim was wondering, well, who's talking to who here? Because there's this voice that's telling the person to, you know, step in, make sure you've got your feet in the right position, stay balanced. What did you do that for? And he came up with self one being the person giving the commands, the instructions, and making the judgments. And it was talking to self two. Now, self two is the human being itself. So it's us. It embodies all of the capacities we were born with, the ones we've actualized and not yet actualized. In short, it's our inherent potential. And I know a lot of you will be familiar with this description. Self two is how we were as children. So we played very naturally. And if you take it right back to learning to walk, we predominantly learnt to walk and talk from self two. Because if you think about it, if we had instructions learning to walk, we'd all be falling over now, tripping up and trying to instruct ourselves on that. It's something that we did before language. So, but self two has a tremendous amount of potential. And what we're trying to do when we're working in the inner game approach is to bring that potential out and to really reduce self one. So there's a little formula, this formula here sums it up quite nicely, that your performance equals your potential minus your interference. Okay, can you see that? Because on my screen it's got a little blank. Yeah, okay. So what this simple formula is saying that we've all got a lot more potential than we actually realize, and so have our students, but equally we've all got a tendency to get in our own way. You know, maybe being nervous, maybe having a lack of confidence and trust in our abilities, and all of these things interfere with our potential. So there's a little diagram there, a mile long. That's where self one appears, and self two is us. Just to talk you through how the cycle of interference happens, this is the eye of the formula, if you like. This example is taken from tennis. And if you took somebody that doesn't like balls going to their backhand, now this could happen in table tennis as well. If somebody pushes deep to somebody's backhand and they're not confident on it. This example comes from tennis. So when the person was hitting backhands in tennis, they saw the ball as a threat, or they see it as a threat. And what they do instantly, whenever you see a threat, you go, uh-oh, here comes a difficult shot. And there's a distortion in your response. So you would shuffle back, jerk the racket back at the last minute, slash down on the ball, all with physical tension in your body, because that's what a threat does to us. And then the judgment after that, that was a terrible shot. You know, I'm just rubbish at backhands. And then it could go into a self-image, a distortion in your self-image, where you're saying to yourself, you know, I'll never learn a backhand. I'm just no good at tennis. And this cycle of interference can go round and round. So what Tim realized in this particular situation was that the ball was being seen as a threat. So his question to himself was, how can I make the players see the ball as a ball again, not as a threat? And in this example of learning to hit a backhand in tennis, what he said to the student was, when I feed you these balls, could you tell me when you hit the ball at the top of the bounce, just before the top, or just after, when the ball's dropped? That's all I want you to pay attention to. Okay? And the student said, yeah, I can do that. So he fed them balls and they started hitting and saying top, just after, top, just before. And when their attention was fully on observing this aspect of the ball height and contact, lots of things started to change. The person started to step into the ball, their shot was a lot more fluid, they were more balanced. And what was happening here in this very simple awareness instruction, if you like, was the person's self-one had quietened down. So they were now seeing a ball as a ball and not as a threat. Okay? And they were allowed to step in and hit the ball. So this became the first principle of the inner game, which was awareness. Okay, so if we can bring awareness to areas that are critical to pay attention to, so in tennis we talk about the ball, the body and the racket, then if we can bring awareness to those areas, then it's going to help people to quieten self-one down, become more in self-two. And the more aware somebody becomes as they're learning, the more clearly they can see the choice over where they want to put their attention. Okay? So choice here is quite important. And what we always say in the inner game is that we want to keep the choice with the decision maker, which is the student, as much as possible. So what would you like to work on today? What did you notice when you hit that backhand topspin? So if somebody in table tennis is noticing on their backhand topspin that they've got some tension in their forearm, we might ask them to just hit some more balls and just tell us a little bit more. Where is that tension in your arm? When do you notice it as you're hitting the shot? And what we find is awareness is curative. And when people do put their attention on it, it starts to cure itself and the person starts swinging more freely. So there are lots of different awareness exercises, and I will come to a few in a moment. And the other element of the triangle here is trust. And trust is about letting go of self-one and trusting more in self-two. So I've been working with some table tennis players at the moment, and a couple of them work in the business world, and they're very much in the business world. When you want to solve a problem, you generally solve it by direct instruction. You find a solution to it. And when they come to learn table tennis, they're trying to do the same thing. So they're telling me that they've looked on the internet and they've read that they need to be leaning over more on the backhand topspin shot, and that they need to, make sure their elbow is in front and in line with their back and all of this stuff. Or somebody might come to me and just not be very aware. So that's another challenge, to try and help people to become more aware. So what we're trying to do is to take people into awareness, and it's awareness in the moment. Some people call it present moment awareness. It's where you get a person monitoring something. It might be to do with the ball, their posture. It could be the bat, the way they're swinging the bat. anything like that. Okay, so that's roughly the principles there. Okay, moving on. I'm not sure, I've put this in here, and I know some of you have watched the video. I don't know if Ali's got anything to say on this, and whether we should do the feedback at the end.
Yeah, so I shared the link to the video within the email that got sent out. I've also put the link to the email in the chat box. Sorry. So when you do get an opportunity, have a watch of it. Hopefully you have watched it already. But I will send the link out again following the webinar.
Yeah. I mean, I could just go through it. So Ali, did you say it has been sent out to some people?
It has been sent out. It got sent out with the link to the webinar. I'm not sure how many people have actually had the opportunity to watch it. Sure. I've also put the link in the chat. So if you want to watch it now, I'm sure you can watch it now quickly if need be, but it's down to you, Andy.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I could just run through it quickly for what to look out for. Just after lockdown, I went round to a friend's house who's a table tennis player and he's got a son, and we did a little video where he wanted to learn how to hit a backhand topspin shot. I asked him, what do you want to practice? He said, I want to hit my backhand topspin. I said, oh, what's happening? How much spin are you getting on the ball, or something like that. And I said, look, just hit a few and see how you get on. So I just let him hit a few balls, and in my observation, I noticed that he was quite tight in his shot and he was trying hard to do something that he thought he should do. So I stopped sort of after 49 seconds or whatever, just before then, and I said to him, okay, would you like to do something that's slightly different to what you're used to? I'm going to feed some balls to you, and I want you to swing, but I want you to notice where the ball ends up. And I'm really interested in your observation for telling me where the ball lands on the first bounce. Does it hit the net? Does it hit the table? Does it hit the floor? So he started hitting a few balls, and what he so initially it's quite a surprise for somebody that's learning to be told it's okay to what we might see as failing, hitting the net, going off the end of the table. But what I knew was it would free him up so that he could play more freely, not knowing he had to do it right. He didn't have to do it right. He didn't have to achieve the outcome of hitting the table. And it allowed him to relax. And as he relaxed, self 2, okay, started to hit the ball. Self 1 had gone quiet. So it's possible, and I don't know because I'm not him, but it's possible there was some dialogue going on and some trying hard about what he should do in that video. But if you watch the end of the video, most of his shots started to go on. He started to play a bit more freely. So yeah, have a look if you have a chance at the end, or I can answer questions at the end about the video or anything like that. So when I take tennis coaches through a program on the inner game, it's done in a progressive way. So what I will do after describing what the inner game is, I'll take a group of tennis coaches onto a tennis court to give them an experience of what awareness is. And quite a few coaches that I've experienced aren't really that familiar with it. And this is the reason we do it. So we tend to work on ball, body and racket. So I would work on the ball awareness first, and I would ask them, there's a great exercise in tennis called bounce hit. And bounce hit is where you ask somebody to say bounce when the ball hits the court and hit when they hit it with their racket. And that's all you ask them to do. Okay, so you just tell them this is the exercise. You call bounce when it hits the ground and hit when you hit your racket, when it hits your racket. They go back and they do this, and then we generally call them in. We say, how much of your attention were you able to put on that exercise? And some people will say 6 out of 10. So we'll ask them, why was it 6 out of 10? And they'll say, well, I was thinking about my contact point, or I've been told by my coach I must finish over my shoulder. So it's very hard to wean people off. So we say, look, go back again and see if you can put a little bit more of your attention on this exercise, because that's the object of this exercise. So they go back and then they start to trust themselves a little bit more, knowing that they're not going to be judged again. And once they've got a high level of attention on this exercise, again, lots of natural changes start to happen. They start to hit, they start to put topspin on the ball, and perhaps they've never hit topspin on the ball. This isn't the coaches, this is the players I'm talking about. The coaches can do that. So bounce hit is one of the best exercises we do. The other ball awareness exercise that I've put on here is to notice how high the ball crosses the net. And we ask the coaches or the players to give a number on their scale for how high the ball crosses the net. So they could have a 1 to 3 scale, a 1 to 5 scale. So they'll hit a shot, and again, they just give us a number or shout out a number. So this is an awareness of the ball exercise. The typical exercise, the typical instruction given in most ball sports is watch the ball, keep your eye on the ball. But what ball awareness exercises do, they compel the student or the player to look at some aspect of the ball. And it's by looking at some aspect or detail of the ball, which enables them to quieten the mind down a little bit, gives them a better focus, and above all, it helps them to make contact with the ball. So we do a series of ball awareness exercises. Then we go into body awareness exercises. So I've done this for table tennis here. In tennis, we might ask about balance. Is your weight back, in the middle, or forwards? We might ask them how much they're rotating their upper body. So, but in table tennis, this is something that somebody said to me the other day, who was quite in their head about it, but didn't really want to, and wanted to really try hard to achieve what concept they had in their head about leaning over the table to hit a backhand topspin. And I suggested that the person not try to lean over the table into any certain position, but became an observer of how much they leant over the table. And I just asked this person, because I said on some of the shots, you know, you might hit your backhand topspin leaning back a bit. You might be lower on other shots. Could you just observe how much you're leaning over? So the person was able to do this. There was a little bit of toing and froing between the trying mode and the awareness mode, where people fall back into the trying mode. And but the person managed to observe their body position, how it varies depending on, you know, what ball is coming to you. I remember talking to Tim Galway about this, and I said to Tim, I'm playing so well at table tennis now because I've got two things I do. One is I make sure I'm relaxed, and the other thing is I stay low to the table. And he said to me, you mean you force yourself to stay low? And I said, yeah. He said, why don't you become an observer of the lowness that you have to the table? And that is the essence of the inner game. It's about becoming an observer of your experience and helping our students to become observers of their experience. Okay? And awareness drills are something that can help people to achieve this. So as coaches, we can direct awareness, which is what these exercises are. So you can get a group of players and you can go, okay, let's pair up. All I want you to do is to notice the height the ball crosses the net. Everyone can have their own scale. And they rally, and they can notice it. So the bat is another one. So again, you can bring awareness to the bat in table tennis and in tennis. I know in tennis we talk about where does the ball hit on the strings. We'll have a number 1 in the middle, a number 2 around the outside, and a 3 is the frame. So when I've worked with a beginner, I've given this instruction to a beginner. Don't try to hit the ball in the middle of the racket, and don't not try to hit the ball in the middle of the racket. Simply be an observer of where the ball does hit. Okay, does it hit here, number 2 or number 3? And they start calling out as they're going. And before very long, because they realize that the coach is saying you can't fail, they start hitting it more in the middle, okay? Because they're starting to relax more. That's the thing that awareness instructions do, providing they're non-judgmental. They help the players to relax more. And this is why they're so effective. What I would do now in a session is I would change the technical do instruction into an awareness raising instruction. So I'll ask the coaches to come up with some typical instructions that they might give. and see if they can turn them into an awareness instruction. So let me show you. So if you look at here, I've done this for table tennis. So if you gave a do instruction, brush the ball more on the forehand topspin, maybe to a medium backspin feed, you could ask the player in awareness to notice how much brush you have for each shot. So the player will hit a shot and go, yeah, I felt like a 3 brush. Next one, not so much, maybe a 2. Next one, oh, that was a 4. And we're helping the player to become more aware naturally of how much brush they're getting on the ball. They're not being forced into the trying mode, if you like, trying to achieve a lot of brush on the ball. Bend your knees is a technical do instruction. And we might say to the players, just to observe how much you bend your knees for each shot, okay? And one of the things to bear in mind when you're doing the awareness instructions also is to give the student the parameters. So I said to somebody the other day, just hit a few shots and show me the most you can bend your knees. So this child went down really low, and it looked silly, but he was experiencing a maximum knee bend. And I said, okay, now hit a few when you're upright, where you don't have any knee bend. So he went across the table, backhand, forehand, standing upright. I said, okay, let's go back into the drill of backhand, forehand, and just pay attention to your knee bend as you go across. And he was able to find out what worked best for him and what felt best for him. Okay, and he said, "Oh yeah, I can really notice it. I probably need to be at this amount of knee bend." So yeah, that's how I would use it. Move your forearm faster. Again, pay attention to how fast your forearm moves for each shot. The difference being, again, that you're asking somebody to observe their experience, right? And similarly for the backhand topspin, for example, just thinking I can give you an examples. I had a person come to me who was learning a forehand topspin and was very fixed on finishing short so he could recover for the next ball. And it wasn't until I discussed with him, what are you trying to do here? He said, oh, I'm trying to finish short on his forehand topspin. And I said, why? Because it wasn't working. I said, you seem very tight and very tense. And he said, well, I've been told to do it. And I said, okay, for what purpose? He said, well, to recover. Okay, so it was obviously to recover for the next ball, which is obviously a critical thing to pay attention to. But we've all seen people finish with a follow through up here and get back to the back ready for the next shot. And I could see this was causing interference. So I said to him, look, how about would you let go on a few and just see where your follow through ends up, just as a little experiment. And he agreed to do it. And when he started to do it, he got back his old forehand topspin, and he got it back even a little bit better because he was more relaxed. And then we looked at recovery. So I said, okay, look, can you see this is working for you? And he agreed. And I said, so do you want to look at your recovery? And he said, yeah, let's look at that. So then it was a progression onto recovery, and he managed to recover okay. So the inner game is really about not always changing things, but bringing more awareness to how somebody's already playing. Okay. So if somebody's hitting it well, we can bring awareness to areas like if somebody's hitting off the table, we can bring awareness to their angle of the bat. We can bring awareness to their forearm. We can bring awareness to all these areas and let them find what feels good and what works best for them without us trying to fix it. I'll just move on to the next one. Awareness raising questions. So as I mentioned just there, I'm directing awareness when I'm coaching. If we ask questions that raise awareness, and I will try and do this as much as possible, because if I ask the student what they're noticing, the student then becomes responsible for their learning. They still become responsible for their learning when I'm directing awareness, but this somehow seems to engage them a little bit more because it's something that they're personally noticing when they're hitting a shot. Okay, so if somebody's hitting a forehand topspin and I said to them, okay, so what are you noticing after they've hit a few balls? And they say to me, oh, I'm noticing that I'm getting more power when I accelerate my forearm. Okay, good. And is there anything else you're noticing? Yeah, when I'm staying a little bit lower to the table. Okay, good. Anything else? Yeah, when I snap my wrist a little bit, I notice that. And then I could say to them, out of the three things you've mentioned, snapping the wrist, staying low to the table, or your forearm moving faster, which one would you like to pay attention to? Then the student who's doing the learning has the choice and is able to say, this is where I'd like to put my attention. Okay, just give you an example. If I can move on. So one thing I would say about the questioning approach as well, it's always useful if people have been used to a directive approach, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, is just to let them know that you might be asking for their experience during this exercise, because quite often people will look at you with blank faces. So priming them that you're going to ask them a question about what they notice, what they experience, can be useful. So in this example here, what did you notice? And the player said, I noticed my contact was a bit late. Is there anything else you noticed? I hit some better shots when I was lower to the table. What did you notice the most? I think my posture and how low I was to the table. So that gives us something that we can then ask them an awareness or help them to become more aware of. So it could be, would you like to observe how low you are when you're playing these shots? Don't try to get low, just observe, pay attention to how your body feels with lowness to the table. And the person then learns more naturally and more effectively from their own experience. Okay, because they're finding out what works. And also questions to increase self-responsibility or choice. So you remember the triangle, we had awareness, choice and trust. When we're asking the students for their experience, it leads into trust because, sorry, it leads into choice because they're telling you what they've noticed, and then you're asking them if they'd like to put their attention on what they've noticed. So in this example, if you're going to look at how low you are to the table, how would you like to set this up? I've given them the choice of how they would like to set up what they've noticed. Oh, I think I'd like to carry on with the same drill. Okay, that's great, let's go. So you start feeding them balls. They're paying attention to how low they are to the table. I'm just going to move on. So just moving on a little bit more, the coach's mindset, I believe, is quite important here, because if you believe that people have more potential inside and they're better able to perform and that their potential can be blocked by the mental interference, I believe that if you have that in your mind, and my experience is when I'm coaching with somebody that I'm looking out always for the things that are getting in the way, and it shows up as them playing tight and with tension. And I always believe they've got a lot more potential in what they're showing me. So I don't always change what they're showing me. I try to bring awareness to it. I will say at this point, because probably a few coaches are wondering, do you ever tell? And yes, I do tell, and I do share my technical knowledge. But if I share my technical knowledge with the players, I'm then really mindful of whether that's created focus in the player or interference. Because if I said to somebody, you know, what could really help you there was if you accelerated your arm a little bit more on the forehand topspin. And I did it in that way, and then I watched the player and they're trying really hard to accelerate their forehand, then I know that they're not in awareness, they're in a trying mode of learning. So I would go over and say, okay, look, don't try to accelerate it and don't not try, just become aware of how fast your forearm's moving for each shot. Okay? Maybe you'd like to show me some really fast accelerations with the forearm, and maybe some that aren't slow, some are really slow. Then go off and just play with that, see what you notice. Okay? So I think the coach's mindset with this approach is obviously, if you have this in the back of your mind, then it can really help your players. Yeah. So this is a nice quote from Tim, that coaching is an art that must be learned mostly from experience. In the inner game, and I can't even remember it because I've got this thing over here. Let me just move it out of the way. In the inner game, sorry, go back again. In the inner game approach, coaching can be defined as the facilitation of mobility. It is creating an environment through conversation and a way of being that facilitates the process by which a person can move towards desired goals in a fulfilling manner. It requires one essential ingredient that cannot be taught: caring not only for the results, but for the person being coached. Okay? So I don't know if you can see that, but a lot of the awareness exercises are done in a way that shows you care about the player. So it's not necessarily about them hitting the table every time, although I know that's really important and I know that we get there in the end, but we get there through their increased awareness. So it tends to be that sort of approach, and therefore it is it's very nurturing, and it's enjoyable because the people they're the learners, they're doing all the learning, you're creating the learning environment. And you know, I see quite a lot of people, I've had a few people come back with the lockdown just over and they're new to table tennis, and I get little emails saying, oh, Sally and so-and-so are really enjoying their lessons, they want to come back. And I think when you do sort of work in this way, you increase learning, yes, but I think more than that, you're increasing retention, and that's a big thing within table tennis, I know, and it is within tennis. If a person has an enjoyable experience on the table, okay, because they're the one that's engaged and is being aware of what they can do with their bodies and bats, and you're facilitating that, that's going to go a long way to people wanting to play more and stay in the game. This is the inner game again. This is everything we've talked about. So the underlying principles of the inner game are focused attention, trust, choice, and non-judgmental awareness. And as you might have gathered now from what I've been saying, that it can help the students to learn more naturally and efficiently. The process recognises their individuality and encourages greater involvement in their learning and therefore motivation. So there's some positives you can see there. And I believe it is a catalyst for inspiring self-belief as well. Because if somebody's learning in this way, the learning's coming from the inside out as opposed to from the outside in. It's coming from the learner. And I think that's a really a lovely thing to see, very fulfilling as a coach. So let me just move on to this. If you want to delve further into what the inner game's about, these are 3 really good books that I would recommend. The Inner Game of Tennis will obviously will help you to develop your understanding and knowledge for the principles and how they're used. Coaching for Performance was a book written by John Whitmore. This will help a great deal with effective questioning to raise awareness and questioning to help self-responsibility in your players. And Helping Children Find the Champion Within Themselves was a book written by David Henry, who was one of the first trainers here in the UK with John Whitmore. They formed a company where they did a lot of business coaching together. But he's written a book, he's quite passionate, David's very passionate about helping children be the best they can be. And that's a really good book. It's got lots of cartoons in it. So it's great. So yeah, I think I've come to the end. I'm open to any questions at all, but thank you for listening.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free again to put them in the chat box. We've got Matt Stanforth and Alan Cook on here as well, and I know, especially on the awareness element, they've implemented that within their coaching sessions, and they kind of touched on sound. So if I know Alan's unmuted, and Matt should be hopefully unmuted in a sec in the video, but it'd be good to get your thoughts, Alan and Matt, on how you've implemented some of this within your sessions.
Yeah, shall I start, Matt?
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. I mean, it's obviously interesting stuff that you're doing, that we are using a lot of this type of coaching within the structure that we've got with our performance squads. And an example of that is, as Ali said, one of the things that we do in the awards system that we've got set up. We set tasks and challenges, really simple, trying to get them a little bit away from thinking about the technical aspects, but the technical aspects need to be fairly solid to pass the tasks and challenges that we set for them. And one of them that Ali talked about there is, for example, the sound difference between when a player topspins a ball and when they drive the ball. Obviously, many years ago, when people were using the speed glues, that was, something that people talked a lot about, the sound and the contact and so on. But even, with today's rackets, there's still a distinct difference between, when the sound of a ball, when a player is really brushing that ball and getting as much topspin on it, or when they're driving through the back of the ball and really hitting it, a lot harder, a lot flatter. And so, one of the tasks in there, I think it's, 20 strokes, but alternating between the two shots. And really, we ask them to just listen to the sound of the ball. And ultimately the technical aspects we don't talk about, but too much. There is some telling in there at a point. If kids, obviously, we have in a performance squad, we do have to help them understand that. But ultimately, in that particular task, it's very much driven by the sound of the two different balls, the brushing of the ball, the topspin, and then the hitting of the ball. And again, we found that's worked really well. After that, their awareness of what's creating the right sounds helps them better build themselves with a little bit of guidance from us, what they need to do technically to get that right. But it's very much focused on the sound aspect. So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about there is, particularly in the Bronze Award, that's very much what we try to do.
We've had a question from Mike. A major ingredient in interference is nervousness in a match. In the context of the inner game, how can a coach help with this?
Okay, so I'll give you an example from tennis first, because that's where I go, and then I'll come back to table tennis. So in tennis, there's this exercise called bounce hit, which I made reference to. So that's an external focus, and it's focusing on the ball. So what I would do is put my attention on just calling bounce and hit. And when a server serves to me in tennis, as soon as they make contact with the ball, I say hit. When it hits the court, bounce, and then hit. And I find that reduces my nervousness. In table tennis, what I tend to do, and I haven't asked too many players about this, but I'll put my attention on noticing the server's contact with the ball, and that will be my main focus. And then I just go straight into the rally from that. So it will just be putting my attention out there and observing what contact is made on the ball. And the other exercise I would use is breathing. I would make sure that I do some practice off the table to relax myself, some diaphragmatic breathing exercises, very useful. And again, a nice deep breath into the diaphragm, again, coming to the table just to relax myself. Does that help at all?
Perfect. We've got a question from Sally as well. So I've unmuted Sally.
Thanks, Andy. Really interesting, I think. Something I kind of touched on a little bit when I did my level 4 around implicit learning. Somebody called Rich Masters did quite a lot around implicit learning. I tried to embed some of that with my regional squad, and I found it really interesting. Does this kind of tie in with that, sort of using analogies? Would you say that's another kind of type of this sort of self-awareness?
Yes. So implicit learning is where you're not really teaching so much, you're helping people to become aware. What the inner game in any sport will look for the critical variables, and then it will bring awareness to those critical variables. So, and it's a big word, but what it means is, in tennis, the ball, the body, and the racket are the key things. Yeah, you've got awareness of your opponent, but when you're learning, then if you can bring some awareness, as I described earlier in the presentation, to the ball, the racket, and the bat and the body, awareness it sort of then helps implicit learning. I think it's the mode through which the implicit learning happens, and is effective even more, because the more awareness somebody has, the more that they can grow and change.
Yeah, I mean, I think just a comment from me, it's this bit about it being far more robust type of learning, and that we sometimes underestimate the ability of especially children to self-correct, and I think sometimes we jump in too soon, whereas actually they have got great potential to self-correct if we give them time to do so, and just raise their awareness rather than give them the answers.
Absolutely, you know, and if you walk around a hall and you just walk up to a child on a table and say, what are you noticing? What you're working on? And you listen, and you say, and they say, oh, I'm just trying to get more spin on the ball. Okay, what's helping that? And you listen, and they say, oh, well, I've noticed that actually that I'm brushing it a bit. Okay, that's brilliant. Do you want to just notice after each one how much you brush the ball? And then you walk on to the next person. So you haven't changed anything. You've really just asked for their experience. Everybody's got an experience when they're performing, and I do believe, as Alan was saying, that you need to get the technical stuff right, but you can also do it through awareness as well, a combination maybe.
So to follow on from that, we got a question from Teresa. In table tennis, the players have the chance to go to the coach in the corner after each game. Do you think using awareness questions is useful in cornering so the players are becoming more self-aware for themselves?
Yeah. So if you have a table tennis club where your philosophy is to train awareness and to train these things, then obviously when somebody goes into a tournament, they're likely to be self-aware, and so you could ask those questions. But it's your call as a coach. It's an intuitive call, because it might be the person needs to just take a breather and calm down a little bit. But if you're training these things in your clubs, then when they go to the performance arena, they're going to have heightened awareness, aren't they?
I'm going to throw Matt under the bus here a bit, but Matt, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're when you're looking at player development and everything, it's very easy, and I definitely fell into this sort of trap as a young coach, is that you're in the corner, you're trying to give the answers because you feel that's what's going to help the players, because you're trying to help them win. But actually, the longer game to actually play with player development is to try and raise their awareness about what's happening. And actually, you can, all the time, you can actually get them to where you need them to be, and use clever questioning to get them to work, get them to realise what you want them to do anyway. But you've actually done it in a way where they're aware of what's happening. And so that then becomes more powerful for them and helps their development in the long, because they suddenly become more tactically aware, more aware of body language of their opponent and everything like that. And that, I was actually going to chip in before on that question from Mike as well, that sort of part about nervousness and exactly what Andy says, you know, actually shift. Sometimes nerves are seen as a negative thing. I think it's actually just normalizing that everyone gets nervous. So I think that's the first bit. But actually then just shifting that out, if the person is focused on their nerves, it suddenly then becomes a big thing, and actually that's when it becomes an issue. But when you shift their awareness to actually what's happening, what they're doing with the serve, what they're doing with their first attack, things like that, the nerves are still there, but it's suddenly not something that's focused on. It's something that's more in the corner of the eye rather in front and centre. So as a way of sort of dealing with those nerves, that becomes easy because you've shifted your attention away from it, but they're still there. So yeah, I mean, I think, and it depends on what, as Andy said, it depends on where they are. So actually, if this is the major championship and you need to give them a bit of a nugget of information, you might tell them something. But if this is a longer term development sort of part of their journey, then actually raising their awareness may be more appropriate. So that's where you've got to use your judgment as a coach, really.
And also a direct instruction can work. You can hit it right on the head, can't you? And you've probably done that in your careers. And just a very simple example, I was walking with a flip chart to a course, and no, this guy was struggling with the flip chart, and I could have asked him, you know, what would help you to hold that a bit more comfortably. But I said to him, look, that middle bar's fixed. Hold it by the middle bar on the flip chart. It's much easier. And he did it, and it was. So sometimes you can hit the point straight away. But if we're trying to build players that have more awareness and have higher awareness and higher self-responsibility, then it has to be trained, and then you just take it onto the table and matches after.
I've got a question from Phil. To what extent do you think video analysis helps within the game, and to what, if any extent, do you use this with your players?
Yeah, anything that helps a player to become more aware of what they're doing, and watching yourself visually can be really, really helpful. It's what you do with that information. So we're conditioned from our earliest upbringings to try too much. And what I would say is just try and help that person who's seen something on the video. They go, oh, I noticed I do that. And it might be that they think they take their back too far. See if you can bring awareness to that by saying to them, okay, we'll go on the table. I'd like you just to notice how far your racket goes back. Just see if just pay attention to that. And that's where the inner game would work, okay? So as coaches, what we've got to do, and I've said this a few times, is that we've got to be aware of when somebody is in trying mode and see if we can get them into awareness mode, because the trying mode will create the tension and the awareness mode creates the free playing fluidity that we're after.
Another question from David. Many players of all ages and standards have problems closing the game out. Any tips on helping to solve this problem?
Sorry, what's that again?
Many players of all ages and standards have problems closing the game out. Any tips on helping to solve this problem?
Yeah, a focus of attention. So where they place their focus is most important. So when they get to that, when they're getting to 9-8, 9-7 up, okay, they're probably going to get nervous, a little bit doubtful. So if they can focus their attention, and this is the trust part of the inner game, trust that where you put your attention is going to help you. And so if as I mentioned, just watching the contact somebody makes on the ball and trust that I'll make an appropriate response to the ball. Or you go back to just noticing the height you send the ball back over the net. So it's where you put your focus, but you must have a focus. I'm sure Matt might have something to say about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a similar sort of thing. I mean, we two things. We always talk to the players about focusing on the process rather than the outcome, and that's what often happens where they can't shut a game out, is because they're thinking of the finish line. So suddenly their attention is shifted to, I'm only 2 more points. These 2 serves, I've got the win, I've got the game, or whatever it is. But actually, to get to that point, what's got them there is actually them thinking about, or it is just thinking about what they're doing to hit the next ball. So it's actually, and we have a trademark that we use within the England squads is staying in the moment, which is specifically around this point. And I know something that Alan, with the senior men's team, that was a kind of a mantra for when the guys won the bronze medal at the World Team Championships, 1 point at a time and staying in the moment. And that was a long piece of work throughout that championship. And it's not easy, because it is easy to suddenly your mind wanders because you're getting nearer, right, we could win a medal here and things, but actually just stepping back, that resetting and being able, right, what can I control now? What do I need to be aware of? What do I need to do? And focusing on that process. And it takes practice. So I think with a lot of things, a lot of these things, it's not expecting to just go to the competition hall and expecting it to happen. This is something, just like learning a stroke and everything, it's something that needs to be practiced in the training hall. And that's how then it can be something that's more refined and will work more effectively for you when you get to the competition hall.
Another question from Graham. Have you ever tried using this approach in a competitive situation by asking the player to become aware of what the opponent is doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an awareness of your opponent is important too. And before you go in, I know a lot of people that play at a high level research opponents, and they know their strengths and weaknesses. So if I'm playing tennis, and you hopefully can translate this into table tennis, but I'll find out what somebody's weakness is. And if it's the backhand, I'll just gently say to myself, okay, let's play to this guy's backhand. But in the match, I'll pick a focus. Like I say, like it'll either be doing bounce hit in the match, which is quite easy to do, or I might notice the height that my balls cross the net. Okay, and just pay attention to that, and that will be enough to absorb my attention and stop me from being nervous.
Perfect. So I think we'll kind of sum up the webinar there. So we'll come to an end. Like any other webinars, if you've got any feedback or any topics moving forward, please email coaching@tabletennisengland.co.uk. I think before we leave, Andy, would you like to say anything?
No, just thank you to everybody that was listening, and I hope it's been of some help. And if you want to contact me, I'm free to answer any questions at all on the email address there.
Perfect. So I just want to say, obviously, a big thank you from us, Andy, for delivering the webinar. I also just want to say a big thank you as well to our performance team, Alan and Matt, and obviously Sal as well for chipping in. Other than that, I hope you all enjoyed the coach webinar. And as ever, again, please email coaching@tabletennisengland.co.uk with any thoughts, any feedback as well on the coach webinars. Other than that, I hope you all stay safe, and we'll catch you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.